In the deepest part of the ocean, an interdimensional rift opens, and from it, monsters called Kaiju begin to emerge continuously. Although humanity tries every possible way to destroy these creatures, conventional weapons prove ineffective against beings of this size. For the survival of the human race, countries set aside all their disputes. And to fight back against the Kaiju, they build gigantic machines. These machines are called Jaegers. However, since piloting a Jaeger alone puts too much strain on a single pilot, a dual pilot system is implemented. After this, humanity begins to gain the upper hand against the giant monsters, and Jaeger pilots become heroes. The main character Raleigh and his brother Yancey are assigned to face a Category 3 Kaiju, codenamed Knifehead. The two enter the head of the Jaeger and begin putting on their special combat suits. The hatches open, and they are lowered onto the massive mechanical body on the assembly line. Their Jaeger is called Gypsy Danger, and as this giant machine is moved toward the hangar, it towers over everything around it. Thanks to the special bond between the brothers, they are able to synchronize their minds and control the Jaeger together. Through this connection, the minds of the two pilots merge via memories, allowing them to control the Jaeger as one. Marshal Stacker tells the brothers to stay put and defend the base. But they disobey the order, and they decide to rescue the 10 people still stranded outside in the middle of the storm. At that moment, a massive Kaiju bursts out of the ocean, rising up over the fishing boat. Just as the monster is about to attack, Gypsy emerges from beneath the waves and pulls the boat out of danger just in time. The brothers furiously punch the Kaiju, landing a heavy blow to its head and knocking it to the ground. The creature quickly attacks again, but Gypsy grabs its head and prepares to use the plasma cannon in its other hand. When they fire, the explosion hurls the Kaiju backward, deep into the ocean. However, the Marshal says that the monster's signal is still being detected. Indeed, the Kaiju bursts out of the water again. It tears off one of Gypsy's arms. Then it grabs the robot's head and rips half of it apart, and during this attack, Yancey loses his life. The main character, Raleigh, is forced to pilot alone. While trying to fire the plasma cannon, Knifehead continues to tear the robot apart. With one final move, Raleigh manages to make a massive shot, and both the Kaiju's and the Jaeger's signals disappear. Fortunately, Raleigh survives and manages to bring the Jaeger to shore all by himself. The robot crashes onto a beach, where Raleigh is rescued by a man and his grandson. 5 years pass. During this time, the United Nations decides to abandon the Jaeger program, because the Kaiju are destroying them much faster than the machines can be rebuilt. World leaders decide that building massive walls to protect the cities is a more logical solution. Despite this pressure from higher up, Marshal Stacker does not give up on the program he leads. Meanwhile, Raleigh has quit being a pilot. He makes a living by working as a laborer on the construction of the coastal wall. However, the workers' efforts are called into question, because in another city, the wall is destroyed by a Kaiju in just a few hours. Fortunately, the city is saved by one of the newest Jaegers built in Australia, Eureka Striker. The Jaeger destroys the monster with missile attacks. The public wants the pilots to stay, but like the other Jaegers, they have to go to Hong Kong. When Raleigh goes outside, he sees a helicopter landing. Marshal Stacker has come in person and calls Raleigh back to duty as a pilot. However, Raleigh refuses the offer because he is still struggling with the memories of his brother. But the Marshal convinces him by asking this question: where would you prefer to die? While building a wall or inside a Jaeger? Raleigh agrees, and together they go to Hong Kong. There, Raleigh meets Marshal's adopted daughter, Mako. However, Mako doesn't have a very good impression of Raleigh. Stacker introduces him to the other Jaegers. Crimson Typhoon from China is operated by 3 base pilots and is known for its storm-like attacks. Cherno Alpha from Russia is one of the toughest and most brutal machines. Raleigh also meets Chuck and his father Hansen, the pilots of Eureka Striker, the pride of Australia. They have an incredible record of killing 10 Kaiju. The Marshal explains his plans. A nuclear weapon will be installed in Eureka, and with the support of the other Jaegers, it will be taken to the location of the breach. When the bomb is detonated inside the portal, the breach will be completely sealed. Then, the team meets the scientist responsible for the mission, physicist Herman and Kaiju biologist Newton. Herman explains that Kaiju will start appearing more frequently, and their numbers will increase until they eventually wipe out humanity. According to him, this concentration in the breach will cause the portal to remain open. This, in turn, creates an opportunity to drop the nuclear bomb. When the explosion occurs, the breach will be permanently sealed. Newton, however, does not agree. According to him, there still isn't enough information about these monsters. Newton says that the Kaiju are actually clones because their DNA appears to be completely identical. For this reason, he argues that in order to better understand the enemy, they need to use the Jaeger's neural link technology to connect with the Kaiju. However, Stacker, not wanting to waste time, dismisses Newton's plan as science fiction and prefers Herman's method. Mako then takes Raleigh to his room. Raleigh wants to know her thoughts about his performance. Mako candidly tells him that he takes too many risks when making decisions. Raleigh accepts this criticism. He falls silent, thinking of his brother, but adds that he is trying to pay for the mistakes he has made. As Mako returns to her room, she feels guilty for having spoken so harshly. When she turns around, she sees Raleigh's muscular body and is momentarily flustered. The next day, Raleigh joins the new partner selection process and manages to defeat every candidate he faces one by one. Raleigh notices from Mako's body language that she is still criticizing him and challenges Marshall to put his brightest student in the ring. Although Stacker hesitates, he allows Mako to fight at Raleigh's insistence. When the two begin to spar, their movements are in harmony and they fight as equals. After several rounds, Marshall stops the fight. Raleigh becomes convinced that Mako is the perfect partner for him. However, Stacker still does not allow her to enter a real battle, and everyone leaves the place disappointed. At the same time, Newton defies Marshall's orders, sets up his laboratory, and begins to establish a neural connection with the Kaiju's frontal lobe. Immediately after, he sees images of the creature's origin and realizes that, just as they suspected, they were indeed bred by aliens. During this process, he nearly loses his life, but Herman saves him at the last moment. After a long deliberation, Marshall goes to Mako's room and decides to keep the promise he made to her. He allows Mako to be a pilot for one mission. Raleigh is surprised when he sees Mako getting into the machine, but he's happy to have finally found a true partner. The two begin the neural handshake process, and their memories start to blend together. Meanwhile, the news from Herman leaves Stacker stunned. Newton has successfully connected to a Kaiju brain. Marshall immediately rushes to the laboratory. Newton explains that the Kaiju are actually biological weapons created by an invading race from another galaxy. This race conquers planets and exploits all their resources. Marshall asks Newton to repeat the experiment, but for that they need another brain. As a result, he arranges for them to contact Hannibal Chow, who sells Kaiju organs on the black market. Meanwhile, things start to go wrong on the other side. During the neural handshake, Raleigh begins to see his brother, who died, and these sudden energy surges destabilize the Jaeger's control. At the same time, Mako's memories also surface. When she was a little girl, her family was killed by a Kaiju, and since that day she has developed a deep fear of these creatures. Even though Raleigh tries to wake her from the memories, Mako's emotional connection is too strong. She gets lost in illusions and accidentally tries to fire the Jaeger's plasma cannon. The team manages to disable the system and prevents the facility from being destroyed at the last moment. Raleigh rushes to Mako's side as she wakes up from her nightmares. Meanwhile, Newton finds Hannibal on the black market. When Hannibal learns that the doctor has established a neural link with a Kaiju's brain, he becomes furious, because this connection is not one-sided. In other words, now the aliens have also gained information about humans, and they will likely come after Newton. When they return to the base, the center detects even stronger seismic activity. This indicates that there will be two Kaiju attacks at the same time. Two Category 4 creatures, codenamed Otachi and Leatherback, are approaching. Marshall sends Cherno Alpha and Crimson Typhoon to intercept the creatures. He assigns Eureka Striker the task of defending the harbor. Raleigh and Mako, on the other hand, are ordered to stay on the sidelines for this mission. Helicopters drop the giant Jaegers in front of the shoreline. Eureka Striker follows them from behind. Shortly after, Crimson Typhoon detects movement in the area. Suddenly, Otachi appears and strikes Typhoon directly with its tail, hurling it into the water. Typhoon quickly recovers and begins to use storm formation tactics. They manage to land multiple blows, but Otachi blocks the blades and gains the upper hand. Typhoon uses its agility to leap up, catches the creature in midair, and hurls it into the ocean. Then Cherno Alpha charges forward and starts pummeling the monster's head with punches. However, Otachi finds an opening and slams Cherno Alpha into the sea. Then it attacks Typhoon again, using its tail to continue its assault, and finally rips off the Jaeger's head, killing the three base pilots inside. Seeing their teammates destroyed, the Russian pilots charge at the creature, but Otachi sprays acid from its mouth, paralyzing the robot. The Australian team rushes to help, but this time Leatherback bursts out of the ocean and attacks Cherno Alpha. The two creatures push Cherno Alpha into the water and blow it up, killing the pilots. Eureka Striker grabs Otachi, lifts it into the air and throws it into the water. Then it prepares to finish the job by firing its missiles. However, Leatherback notices the attack and unleashes a massive EMP blast. This blast disables the Jaeger and all electronic systems in the city. With no other options left, Stacker allows Raleigh and Mako to deploy. Because their Jaeger, Gypsy Danger, is powered by a nuclear reactor, it is unaffected by the EMP attack. At the same time, because Newton previously connected with their brain, he is chased by Otachi. As the monster devastates the city, Newton tries to escape to the nearest shelter. Meanwhile, Hansen decides to leave the machine, but the Kaiju's punch shakes the Jaeger and throws him against the wall. His arm is seriously injured. He and his son decide to make one last sacrifice to protect the city. They try to distract the kaiju with flares to buy time for the people. However, this attempt only angers the monster and the creature turns toward them. Just as it's about to attack, Gypsy Danger appears and draws the monster's attention. Leatherback charges at Gypsy, but Gypsy maneuvers behind it and destroys its weapons. This enrages the monster and it throws both of them onto the shore. Gypsy lands solidly and quickly attacks Leatherback, delivering devastating blows. Although the kaiju regroups and attacks again, Gypsy manages to stop it. They ready the plasma cannon and fire repeatedly. After the attacks, the creature's arm is severed and Leatherback loses consciousness. Gypsy throws its body to the ground and, following the trail of destruction, goes to hunt the other creature. Just as Otachi is about to eat Newton, it senses a presence approaching from behind. When it turns around, it sees Gypsy Danger approaching with a massive cargo ship in its hand. Raleigh and Mako use the ship like a sword and strike the monster with consecutive blows. But Otachi fights back and throws the ship away. Then it sprays acid from its mouth. However, Gypsy narrowly escapes the attack. The robot grabs the creature's tongue. This way, it tries to neutralize its weapons. Mako releases the coolants, freezing the monster's tail and then breaking it apart. Afterwards, the two of them together rip the monster's tongue out from the root. But this time, Otachi spreads its wings. It grabs Gypsy and takes off into the air. It carries Gypsy into the sky, crashing into the city's skyscrapers along the way. As they try to break through the atmosphere, Gypsy's systems start shutting down one by one. Deciding to use their last resort, Mako activates the robot's sword and slices the creature in two with a single strike. Gypsy begins to fall, but they manage to slow their descent by channeling their energy into a blast. When they hit the ground, a massive shockwave forms, but Raleigh and Mako escape unharmed. When they return to base, everyone greets them with applause. Meanwhile, Newton discovers that one of the slain kaiju was pregnant. Thanks to the offspring that emerged from the creature's belly, they realize they can use its brain to establish a neural connection again. Herman decides to help his friend one last time out of hope. Together with Newton, he establishes a neural connection again, linking to the kaiju's brain, and by scanning its memories, they uncover the secrets about the breach. Soon they realize that the current plan won't work and they rush to the command center to inform the marshal immediately. At the same time, Stacker decides to take the place of the injured Hansen and becomes the Jaeger's second pilot. Knowing that this mission could be his last battle, Chuck says goodbye to his father. The two Jaegers are deployed into the ocean and begin advancing toward the breach. While maneuvering underwater, they realize that visibility is extremely poor. When they reach the vicinity of the portal, two kaiju appear, Scanner and Raichu, both category 4 level. But strangely, the creatures do not try to stop them. At that moment, the two scientists enter the control room and ask them to halt the operation, because only those with kaiju DNA can pass through the breach. The only way to trick the system is to go through the portal with a monster. Before the doctors finish their explanation, the radar detects a new kaiju. This time, it's a category 5 kaiju named Slattern. While Raleigh and Mako try to help their teammates, they are attacked by Scanner. Although they manage to bring the monster down, this time Raichu attacks from behind and tears off one of the Jaeger's arms. Then it quickly lunges at Raleigh, but instead of dodging, Raleigh points his sword and slices the creature in half using its own momentum. Meanwhile, Slattern attacks the other Jaeger, Eureka Striker, and pushes it away from the breach. The team fights back. They stab their swords into the creature at the same time, wounding it. Slattern screams in pain and calls for help from the other monsters. The two creatures join forces and launch a deadly attack at high speed. Realizing there's no escape, Marshall decides to make one last sacrifice. He will use himself as a bomb to clear the way so that Gypsy Danger can detonate its nuclear reactor inside the breach and close the portal. He detonates the bomb, and the waters beneath the ocean recede with a massive explosion. Gypsy braces itself for the impact and continues advancing toward the breach. However, surprisingly, Slattern survives the explosion and stands in their way to prevent Gypsy from reaching the portal. With one final move, Gypsy Danger lunges at Slattern and strikes it repeatedly with its sword. Raleigh activates the central reactor and burns a hole through the monster's body. Finally, the creature dies, and the team manages to pass through the breach, dragging its body along with them. However, due to lack of oxygen, Mako begins to lose consciousness. To save her, Raleigh places Mako in the escape pod and launches it, sending her away from the aliens. He then disconnects himself and goes to the nuclear reactor, setting the explosion to 60 seconds. After that, he launches his own pod, and Gypsy continues to fall uncontrollably toward the Kaiju's military base. As the aliens stare at the machine in shock, the reactor reaches critical level. A massive explosion occurs. The entire base is destroyed and the breach closes at the same time. Both Mako and Raleigh survive the explosion. When they reach the surface, the people are celebrating the victory with joy. The two embrace each other. Just then, military units arrive at the scene to rescue them.